In 1951, a woman walked into a hospital with a pain she couldn't explain. She would be dead within the year, but a piece of her would never die. Not metaphorically, literally. Her cells are still alive today, in laboratories all over the world, multiplying by the trillions. And for over 20 years, her own family had no idea. Her name was Henrietta Lacks, 31 years old, a mother of 5. She lived in Baltimore, Maryland, and worked hard to support her family. When she started experiencing abnormal pain and bleeding, she went to Johns Hopkins Hospital, one of the only hospitals in the area that treated Black patients at the time. During an era of segregated medicine, doctors discovered an aggressive tumor on her cervix, cervical cancer. During her treatment, a doctor did something Henrietta was never told about and never consented to. He removed a small sample of her tumor cells and sent them down the hall to a researcher named George Gay, who had spent years trying and failing to keep human cells alive outside the body. Every human cell sample Gay had ever tried to grow in a lab had died within days. Henrietta's cells were different. They didn't just survive, they multiplied aggressively, doubling every 24 hours, seemingly without limit. Gay had never seen anything like it. He named the cell line Hela, using the first 2 letters of her first and last name. He had no idea he'd just created one of the most important tools in the history of medicine. While her cells thrived in laboratories, Henrietta herself did not. The cancer spread aggressively through her body despite treatment. Just 8 months after her diagnosis, on October 4th, 1951, Henrietta Lacks died. She was buried in an unmarked grave in Virginia. Her family grieved. They had no idea that at that very moment, millions of copies of her cells were already being shipped to laboratories around the world. What happened next is almost hard to comprehend. HeLa cells became the foundation for the polio vaccine, tested on a massive scale using her endlessly multiplying cells. They were sent into space to study the effects of zero gravity on human tissue. They were used to study cancer, radiation, toxins, and eventually, in developing treatments for HIV and AIDS. HeLa cells even played a role in developing the HPV vaccine, a vaccine against the very type of cancer that killed her. To date, over 50 million metric tons of her cells have been grown. More than 70,000 scientific studies have used them. For over 20 years, Henrietta's own family had no idea any of this had happened. They didn't know her cells existed, let alone that they had become one of the most commercially valuable tools in medical history. Companies were selling HeLa cells for profit. Meanwhile, Henrietta's own children couldn't always afford basic health insurance. It wasn't until the 1970s that a researcher contacted the family, not to explain what had happened, but to ask for more blood samples for further genetic research. That's how they first learned the truth. Henrietta Lacks' story became one of the most important cases in the history of medical ethics. It raised uncomfortable questions that the medical world had never seriously confronted. Who owns your cells once they leave your body? Does a patient deserve to be informed and to consent before their tissue is used for research? And should families share in the profit when their loved one's biological material generates enormous commercial value? These questions directly shape the informed consent laws and research ethics standards used in hospitals today. In the years since, Henrietta Lacks has finally begun receiving the recognition she was denied during her lifetime. Johns Hopkins has publicly acknowledged the ethical failures in how she was treated and named research facilities in her honor. In 2023, her family reached a settlement with a biotech company that had profited from her cells for decades. Today, when you get a vaccine, when a new cancer treatment is developed, when scientists study a virus in a lab, there's a real chance that somewhere in that research's history, HeLa cells and Henrietta Lacks made it possible. Henrietta Lacks never knew what her cells would become, but because of them, she has quietly touched nearly every major medical breakthrough of the last 70 years. If stories like this fascinate you, subscribe. Every week, we dig into the strangest true stories medicine has ever recorded.